Hello. In this video, we start in project settings, and we're going to focus on dimensions, specifically on the preset dimensions you can install in Klaro. Just before that, we're going to look at these three parameters here. The lock feature blocks the option to create new values, not only here, but also in boards. For example, if we go into the team load Kanban, we can see here that because it's unlocked, we can create a new reviewer directly in the board. While when we lock it, this is no longer possible. Keeping things unlocked is useful at the start of a project when we're exploring possible values for dimensions that we're creating. We've already covered the required checkbox in a previous video. It's a way to make users input a value for the dimension in question when they create a card. To demonstrate the multiple checkbox feature, let's do it on the series dimension. If we tick this box and go into a card, we can see that we now select multiple values for this dimension, unlike the other dimensions where the widget only allows for the selection of a single value. Now we're going to look at the types of dimensions we can create. I'm not going to go through them all, because some of them, notably the poll and tracker parent card dimensions, are a bit complicated and require dedicated videos. I'm going to go through the simpler ones on the list. The track your own list dimension is the most typical Klaro dimension. It's a list of values that you create yourself. A good example is the series dimension that we created for the books series 1 to 6. Then, there are dimensions like track any date and track any number. If we'd like our cards to show the publication date for each book, I'll cover this particular notion of values that you can see here for the publication date dimension in another video. Then, by creating a publication date dimension, we get a calendar widget on the card, which allows us to choose a date. And in the All Cards list here, if we chose to show this information on cards, then it's displayed here as a date. It's also possible to be able to filter values so as to specify dates. But we'll cover that later on in a dedicated video. It's the same principle for numbers. I'm not going to go into detail about it here, but we can add numbers to cards and choose whatever numbers we like. Again, it's the same principle. We can link these numbers to filter values. We'll look at this in another video. Card due date is a special kind of date, as various features are being created around due dates that are not available for the regular tracker date dimension. We've already come across the tracker member dimension in a previous video. It was used to track reviewers, as we can see here. A special quality of tracker member is that the list of values that you can see here automatically synchronizes with the list of members in your project. These members are either virtual, as you can see here, where we haven't yet invited them, or real, because you have given them access to Klaro by registering their email address and sending them an invitation. We can, of course, create multiple tracker member dimensions. In our case, we have reviewers, but we might also have translators. For such scenarios, it makes sense to use multiple tracker member dimensions. And you could continue to create dimensions for whatever other roles you need. As we saw already, the list of values synchronizes automatically with the list of team members. The tracker workspace dimension is exactly the same principle as tracker member, but it is linked to the notion that we see here of workspaces. That will be covered in another video. The progress changed at dimension is linked to the card progress dimension, which we already installed, as you can see in the project settings page behind. If we install the progress changed at dimension, we're titling it in step since. We can see the default values, which we can change as we wish. Then Klaro keeps us informed of the date the last time the card was moved along the progress dimension. typical example. In Kanban, we move cards from one column to another, and Klaro tracks the last moment each card was moved along the progress dimension. Keeping this information in the in-step since dimension. So now we can use the filters to see which cards have had their progress changed recently or not. This can be a useful way to keep up to date with cards that have been stuck in non-done columns for a long time and associated work that is not yet complete. Klaro allows us to create several dimensions that perform simple calculations, such as computer date and computer number, but we'll look at these in another video. The next two dimensions we're going to cover here are of the same principle as the progress changed at dimension, but more global in nature. You can track the date and time of the creation of cards and of the last change to cards. If we install the card creation time dimension, then we can see here a certain number of default values that help with filtering. And in the list view, we get a column showing the dates cards were created. Likewise, for the card's last updated time dimension, we get a column showing that particular information. Again, it's important to remember that as soon as you add dimensions, you also find them in filters and other locations in settings, such as cards appearance, where, for example, you can choose to display creation dates on cards themselves. Wherever you can use dimensions, you are able to use them on cards, in filters, and in many other ways, such as the ordering of cards. Like we saw in a previous video, in settings we have the cards ordering setting. It's often sensible to use this to display recently created cards, for example, at the top of a board. Being able to use all these dimensions well requires a bit of experience with Klaro. As a final tip, repeating what I said in a previous video, really think about a board's objective. What's the goal of the person or the team using the board? This will guide you to understand which dimensions you require, which of these you need to display on cards, and how you should use dimension information to order the cards. So, we've completed an initial tour of special dimensions. In future videos, I'll cover other elements such as collaboration, track a parent card, and calculated dimensions. Enjoy!